Hello, and thanks for joining us. On behalf of the Environmental Finance Center Network, welcome to our Ask the Expert webinar on developing the water workforce. My name is Tess Clark. I work here at the Syracuse Environmental Finance Center. And before we get started, I'm going to quickly go over some important information on our program today. First, keep in mind that everyone is on mute to ensure audio quality. I want to draw your attention to the question dialog box on your GoToWebinar control panel. Please send us questions using that box. We will be having an extended Q&A at the end of the presentation. We will also post today's presentation and webinar recording on our website, efcnetwork.org. Registered attendees can receive a certificate of attendance for participating in this webinar today. This webinar has not been submitted to licensing agencies for continuing education credits. You must attend the entire 1-hour session, and you must log into the webinar on your tablet or computer using your unique join link. This is how we know that you attended. The certificate will arrive via email within 30 days of today's date. You can always contact us at smallsystems@syr.edu if you have questions about this. Now for a little bit about us. The Environmental Finance Center Network is a university-based network providing individualized technical assistance, workshops, small group support, webinars, and e-learning to small systems in all states and territories. We focus primarily on small water systems and helping those systems meet their goals and regulatory requirements. And here you can take a look at our small systems team. Like I said, we are a network of environmental finance centers, mostly based at universities across the country. During today's webinar, you'll hear from our staff at the Syracuse EFC, as well as Wichita State University Environmental Finance Center. Our centers specialize in several areas of assistance important to water infrastructure, including asset management, fiscal planning, and workforce development, which you will hear about today. Specialists from our centers are available to water systems for free or low-cost technical assistance work. For more information, you can reach out to smallsystems@syr.edu or go to efcnetwork.org. On that note, I'd like to introduce our speakers today. Tonya Bronleewe is a program manager at Wichita State University Environmental Finance Center. Before coming to the EFC in 2015, Tonya served the city of Wichita as an air quality specialist, and prior to that, she was a natural resources extension agent and environmental education program coordinator for K-State Research and Extension. Next, Khris Dodson is the associate director of the Syracuse University Environmental Finance Center, where he provides technical assistance to local governments on planning, leadership, and finance. Khris currently serves on the board for the New York Water Environment Association, where he helps lead the charge on developing the water workforce pipeline. All right, Khris, go ahead and take it away.
Thanks. So this, as Tess mentioned, this is an Ask the Expert webinar. If you've attended our webinars before, we essentially have two types of webinars. One that spends the bulk of the hour introducing some material to you and then taking a little bit of Q&A at the end. This is kind of opposite of that, where we try to move swiftly through some slides, cover the topic at a high level, and then leave more time for questions. So hoping that you guys have some comments and questions for us that we can try to discuss at the end. So that said, this is about workforce development, and I wanted to start really by sharing with you a report that the Brookings Institute published last June called Renewing the Water Workforce, Improving Water Infrastructure by Creating a Pipeline to Opportunity. And so I mention this and include this because it's super focused on what we're here talking about today, the workforce needs of the water industry. It doesn't focus as specific as we try to on small systems, but I think this is telling of the national kind of epidemic, really, that we are facing in the water industry, being able to attract people to the industry, and certainly then also to the small systems and the unique challenges that are presented there. So essentially, there's a couple major statements in this report. It's only 60 pages or so, which actually isn't all that long, so it's kind of easy to delve into if you want to find it on your own on the internet. But essentially, they say, you know, the economy continues to grow, but we're having a really hard time getting the people who need jobs into the jobs that are available and that are needed, like water, right? So we kind of have this misalignment, and when we have 4% unemployment, which is quite low, we have this misalignment of where are the jobs, the empty jobs that we need to fill, the projected jobs that we're going to need to fill as more baby boomers are retiring, and then we look at where the unemployed people are, and it's geographically, but it's also their knowledge and their skills and their abilities, their training. And we're finding that there's a misalignment there, right? So, and at the same time, you know, our water infrastructure is in urgent need of repair, maintenance, restoration, and people to do that kind of work. So there's also a misalignment of being able to get the folks who need jobs trained and put them into water jobs. And that's what this report kind of discusses. So a few highlights from the report. You know, there's about 1.7 million workers in the water in the water industry in 2016, and so they define the water industry broader than just utilities, right? So you'll see here, just about 18% of the employees are water utilities, and the other 82% represent you know, local municipal folks, people who construct this type of infrastructure, the design engineers, consultants, regulators, et cetera, et cetera. But just to give you an idea. And then here's the 15 largest occupations across the entire workforce and their share of the employment. So a lot of plumbers, pipe fitters, steam fitters, laborers, and then water and wastewater treatment plant and system operators represent about 7% of the total water workforce. And so if we're looking more specifically at water utility occupations, you'll see that this is how it's broken down. Of course, the vast majority are plant and system operators themselves, but that also includes meter readers, electricians, plumbers, pipe layers, and then the clerks, maintenance, et cetera, et cetera. So all of these are screenshots from the report that I'm sharing with you. One thing that I think is really interesting, and I think bears some consideration by people currently in the water workforce, is that particularly at the low end of wages, if you compare the wages of people in the water workforce, water occupations against the average of all occupations, you'll find that particularly at the bottom end of the chart, we're outpacing the average of all occupations, right? So you could imagine a design professional is making decent money, and so they're probably further up the scale on this chart. But then the folks that we need in certain critical positions day-to-day basis, and particularly entry level maybe, they may be in the middle of the scale, which still outcompetes all occupation wages, or at the lower end. And so when we hear people saying that they might make more stocking shelves at Walmart as opposed to working at one of our utilities, that may not necessarily be the case. And in your community, if it is the case, then I think you could use information like this to justify being able to find the funds to provide a more meaningful wage so that you can better compete with those types of jobs and industries. And so this is just looking at a comparison again of the different specific occupations, their salaries at those percentiles, as well as the percentage of the education percentage of high school or less. So you can see, you know, what type of education does it take to get into that position? How much does it get paid at the 10th percentile, 25th percentile. And we're finding that, again, they're earning more than the average of all occupations at those percentiles. And again, that's a national average. So the point of including this slide is that so the statement made in the Brookings report here is that two-thirds of water workers are white male, and that it's an opportunity for diversity and including younger, more diverse folks. But my point of including that, which is all good and true, but my point of sharing this is that our workforce is aging, right? And so the need to replace folks is important and critical. Again, underscoring the point of the Brookings report in the first place. So they came up with some recommendations that I'm not going to necessarily read each and every one. This webinar is being recorded and posted on the website, and you can also again download the report if you'd like and look at these. Each of these actions has a couple paragraphs of narrative that comes behind it to explain the intent of the action and how the action might be implemented. So that information is in the report, and I think interesting if that's something you want to look at. And the actions are also broken up really in three ways: employer-driven actions, so looking at the specific utility or community; regional actions, so looking at maybe counties or a collection of counties or regions of a state, or maybe even a few adjoining municipalities, and then state and federal actions. And again, it bears repeating that this is looking at the water industry as a whole, not just small systems. So I'll point out a couple. So utilities and other water employers need to empower staff, adjust existing procedures, and pilot new efforts in the support of the water workforce. The workforce is changing. The expectations of the people in the workforce have changed. And so in order to keep up with those expectations that I think Tonya will probably detail a little bit in a minute, we need to also change the workplace and the culture as much as we can. And also being able to account for the workforce needs as part of the budget and the capital planning process, and making sure we have those good, consistent labor metrics. Maybe updating or creating new job categories for greater flexibility for potential applicants. Make the job more interesting if they can spend some time in the lab and out in the field. Creating bridge programs like a water boot camp, ways to engage younger workers. And Tess mentioned at the beginning of the webinar that I work with NIWEA, the New York Water Environment Association, on developing a water pipeline, not a literal one, a water workforce pipeline. Just yesterday, we were in a high school letting folks know that this industry exists. When I was in high school, I didn't know this industry existed. And so are we going to nab all those kids and get them into the industry? Of course not, but at least we've planted a seed. And out of those 30 or 40 kids that visited with us, we might get a few that move through a program into the workforce. So anyway, here's a list of employer-driven actions, and I kind of knocked off a couple. Also thinking about internships and things to get people in. And then we have the regional action. So a broad range of employers, right? So it might be smaller systems working together with a large system and other community partners to be able to maybe pool resources or develop platforms for communication and engagement for people, to get people into the water workforce, and have that consistent dialogue. So folks are really on the same page and maybe able to work together to solve mutual needs. And so, ways to do that, maybe regional job posting websites, having maybe a regional academy. So you're a small system. You don't have time to run a water boot camp, but maybe you might have a little time to work with others to help develop one that you then might benefit from. Holding an annual water summit meet and greet with prospective workers, doing like a job fair, right? And again, as a small system, maybe you're not the one who's sitting at a table all day at a job fair, but the fact that there might be a water workforce job fair in your region, in your county, that is hosted by a university or a college or like an AWWA section or a COG or a large utility. Those are ways to get people in and potentially help to attract new talent. And then the recommendations for the national and state actions. One is to form at the national level a water workforce council to really serve as an advisory body with an eye toward future priorities. Having that conversation at the national level, I think, is important. It takes a long time, essentially, for that conversation to trickle down, if I could say that, to the local level where you really need people in jobs. But that conversation does help. They also recommended expanding federal and state funding for workforce development programs, including apprenticeships, and also expanding federal funding for grant programs that might serve for training to get people into the workforce. All that to say, none of these things are a silver bullet, but these are the recommendations that came out of this report, and so I wanted to share them with you. Now, before I hand it over to Tonya, I just want to speak very briefly about the work that we do. Sorry, it's okay. The work that we do, the training that we do in the workforce development workshop that we provide, and the webinars. So all of our webinars are recorded, and I think between Tonya and I, we've covered most of the workforce topics through those. But we really talk about human capital management, and that includes the skills, the people, the skills that they have, and also the roles that you need, or the roles that you have and the skills that are needed to perform those roles, right? We're also talking about the way we talk about what we do. How did you get into the water industry? That's a good question that we ask at our workshops, and it's interesting how people get there. And so asking yourself that, like, how did I get this job? Did my uncle give it to me? Did I learn about it out of high school, et cetera, et cetera? And then how do we talk about the industry in local terms, in regional terms, in national terms? Excuse me. The national dialogue about infrastructure, if you listen, they talk about bridges and airports and roads and trains, but they don't talk about pipes and pumps. And so at the local level, how visible is your utility? People can't necessarily value what they don't see, and we all value water, but I think it's so ubiquitous that people take it for granted, and therefore then take the utility for granted and all the work that you do for granted, and then it's hard to pay for it. So that messaging piece is really important. And then we talk about recruitment. So how do you recruit new folks? Where do you look? What tools do you use? It takes time, and then once you recruit, being able to develop that succession plan, and looking at knowledge transfer, looking at building in tools and techniques and time for existing employees to essentially train up newer employees before they leave. And again, I know as small systems, many of you do not have the opportunity to do that, but ideally that's where you want to be. And then being able to retain folks, and there's a lot of ways to retain them. Tonya is going to talk about kind of the workplace expectations of younger generations here in just a minute. But being able to evaluate, and it's not necessarily just like a performance evaluation, but making sure that your needs are met and the needs of the employee are met, and that that's an ongoing mutual conversation, is really an important aspect of employing people in the water workforce. So with that said, I'm going to stop talking, and Tonya is going to pick up, and then when she's done, we'll start answering some questions. I think, as Tess mentioned before, there's a questions tab on your dialog box for the webinar. So anytime you have a question, go ahead and type it in there, because we will start picking those questions up, and when the time comes, we'll answer them. So Tonya, take it away.
All right, thanks, Khris. So we talk a lot about millennials and that generation, but I'm going to talk about the next generation that's coming, Gen Z, and talk about how to relate, recruit, manage, and evaluate these folks, because they're going to come into your workforce. If they're not there yet, they're going to come soon, or these are the folks that you're going to want to recruit so that you can have that succession plan. That pipeline of talent to rise up through your organization. And I was at a meeting a couple of weeks ago, and we've got an awesome city council member named Becky Tuttle, and this is what she said about how she sees her role in her organization. She said, you want your staff to become you, and you want your interns to become staff. So I think that's a great visual to think about workforce development. The folks that you're having come in as interns, or those students that you go out and talk to in the high schools, folks on the street, those folks, you want to bring them in so that they can become good staff. And then the folks that are currently your staff, you want to start training them up so that they can become you. Always have that in mind in every conversation, every hire. You are filling the positions for the future. So you're constantly building that workforce. So thinking about that next generation that's going to be coming in, this Gen Z, we like to call them, they're folks pretty much, every generation, nobody can exactly pinpoint where it starts and where it stops, but generally these young people were born around the year 2000. Z does not stand for zombies. A lot of folks think that's what it stands for because they're all just zombies staring at their phone. And although they currently sometimes are called screenagers because they do spend a lot of time staring at phones and tablets, the Z actually doesn't stand for anything, just Gen X, my generation, we're the 40-somethings, 30, 40s. The Gen Y, those millennials, they're actually in their 20s and 30s now. They're in the workforce. They're not new to this game. So Gen Z, they're the new folks, and they're who we're going to focus on today. I don't know if this scares you, but you have the potential of having 5 generations in your workplace at one time. Smaller systems, you've probably got just 1 or 2 of these folks. But they might be from different generations, and that might be, if you're having some, communication conflicts, that might be why. But if you're at a larger organization, you could have someone from each of these generations, which kind of seems like it could be a recipe for disaster. But if you harness the strengths of each of those generations and really, focus on the expectations of each, it could really be beneficial. Oftentimes older generations are uncomfortable with the new generations coming in because, how we grew up and kind of the experiences our generation grew up in give us, different ideas and values. We talk differently. Gen Z, they don't even know what flip phones are, let alone a rotary dial phone or a, phone with a cord into the wall. I mean, that would just be ridiculous to them. So finding common ground, finding how we can communicate with each other, and just knowing where kind of someone from a certain generation is coming from helps us kind of see things from their view so that we can enhance that communication. I really like this graph. And again, like Khris said, you can go back through the recorded version of this and take a look, or if you just Google down at the bottom, you see that managing 5 generations in the workplace, just Google that and this graphic will pop up, because I did not make it, I stole it. So I think there's a few things just to highlight from each generation that just thinking about these things as we relate to these folks in the workplace will be helpful. Traditionalists, those folks that are probably the most experienced in our organization, a lot of them have retired, but there might be still 1 or 2 out there. The traditionalists, they believe in that hierarchical management style. So when things aren't in hierarchy, or if people aren't going through that certain process of communication and that kind of thing, when things become more casual, that might really stress them out. So, remembering that and being sure to acknowledge that and make that a more comfortable situation if you're going away from that. Oh, hold on. Sorry, I went backwards. Baby boomers, there are a lot of these folks in the organizations right now. They value traditional and structure-led courses. They love professional development and they love learning. So that is what they enjoy. Gen X, they really like kind of a hands-off, don't micromanage me kind of style. So knowing that might really, giving them a task and then letting them go with a hands-off kind of style, but checking in every once in a while to make sure they're on the right track. That's going to get your best work out of those Gen X folks. Millennials, they want to make sure that where they work aligns with their personal core values. So as much as you can, making sure that those millennials know that what they believe is great and right and true and important is what the organization thinks is important. So, bringing those missions up and how you're aligning with the mission of the organization to provide clean water, to be a economic development tool for the community, whatever those goals and values are, emphasize that that's what you're there for as a workplace, and that's going to give them that value added that they want out of their work. And then Gen Z, these new folks, they actually, no matter how much they're on their phone, they actually value in-person communication and interpersonal interactions, and they want feedback on a kind of that ongoing basis, like millennials. They, how am I doing? Is this okay? Giving them that frequent and ongoing feedback is important for those Gen Z folks. We're all a product of the times that we grew up in. The world events, the technology, the economy that was going on as we went through our formative years is what really influences a generation and kind of gives them that character. So again, I like to always say this, we are all each unique. Not everyone in the same generation acts the same, thinks the same, has opinions that are the same. But there are these world events that kind of shape a generation that makes, kind of gives you the ability to find the similarities. So that's where these things are coming from. So the first thing, I think there's 3 things, there's a lot of things about Gen Z that has made them the way that they are. But these are 3 I'm just going to highlight because they transition into how we manage them in our workplace. First of all, and recruit them to work for us. Gen Z has folks born after 2000 really have never known an economy that is flourishing. Since they were born, the economy has been trending down. They've grown up most of their years during this Great Recession. They really value financial security. They're more financially savvy, and financial matters are more important to them at this young age than any other generation in the past, because of the way the economy has been since they were born. They seek financial security. They're anxious about their financial future. Just example, when Gen X and millennials went to college, it was all about, getting that college experience. High school students that are graduating, it was, what are you going to do to find yourself and, develop yourself as a person. And then kind of after that, then you decide what you want to do for a job. Gen Z, these young people are thinking about the return on their investment. And am I going to go to college, and when I get out, how is this money that I spent on college going to come back for me in the way of a job, in the way of my financial success in my employment? They're not looking for that quote unquote college experience. They're looking for what can I invest in myself so that I can get a job that pays, what I want in the future. Corporate and government scandals, with the onset of the internet and, just the way news and information gets out there these days, we have learned about a lot of business scandals, religious scandals, government leaders scandals, and this has eroded Gen Z's trust in pretty much all our institutions and leaders. They are skeptical. They aren't super loyal to traditions or organizations because what they have seen hasn't proven to be very trustworthy. So they're not going to trust something until it has earned their trust. And then social media and the news cycle, of course, social media is huge for this young generation. However, they have learned from their millennial predecessors about oversharing. Gen Z actually shares a lot, but they don't share publicly. 86% of Gen Zs say that keeping your posts private, those social media posts private, is more important than getting likes and follows. Millennials, it was all about how many followers can I have, and I want to share what I had for breakfast because 3 people care. That Gen Z has learned that public sharing is not, they don't see public sharing as something valuable. They want to share with their small group of friends that they have chosen. So that privacy is a big deal for them. And then they're obviously multitaskers. I think the statistic is Gen Z are often interacting with 5 screens all at one time. They've got laptops, homework on the laptop, a tablet going, a phone, a TV screen, probably streaming something, not actually watching TV on it from a local station. So they can multitask. But with this multitasking, they're also hyper aware and often overwhelmed with the constant influx of that 24-hour news cycle. Most of the time, of course, it's not great news. And so there's a little bit of overwhelming, some stressed out young people out there because of all that. So all that to say, how do we then relate to these folks with sort of some of those tendencies or those views of the world? Well, first of all, if you are managing or even talking to a Gen Z, having any sort of relationship, your kids, a coworker, someone you meet just out on the street, be real. Young people today, they can spot a fake a mile away. They have grown up in the era with fake pictures, fake, advertisements, fake news, all those things. They can spot something that's not real a mile away. They have this inborn skepticism. And so if you're putting on a front, if you are trying to quote unquote act a certain way that's kind of against your natural tendencies, they're going to spot that, and that's not going to feel authentic or trustworthy to them. So just be real. You don't have to be perfect. They would rather see a manager or a leader struggle with something, admit that they can't figure something out, or that they need to learn something in order to be successful, rather than someone saying, yes, I've got this, I know everything about this topic, and then learning later that they don't. They want honesty over perfection. And then, of course, due to various factors, young people are quote unquote turning into adults slower than in previous generations. We don't want to shame them for it. We've made them that way. We've been helicopter parenting over them. We've been super safety conscious with this generation. We can't let them go play, on the sidewalk out front because you might get kidnapped. Like this whole super, don't climb the tree without a helmet because you might fall. All these things. Not that those are bad, because we do want to keep our children safe, but it's made them wary of risk taking, which is sort of part of turning into an adult. So, and we've micromanaged their time so much with their practices and their lessons and all these things that we have them do as children, managing their own time is sort of overwhelming to them once they're kind of out in the world doing it for themselves. So young people coming into your organization might be a little nervous about what I call adulting. So be sure to encourage them to do more decision making and being hardworking. Show them how to be hardworking, patient, on time, trustworthy. All those things that you want, be sure that you're demonstrating that to them, and then also setting those high expectations for them, and letting them know that they're expected to do those things. They'll be okay with it. They just need to know what those expectations are, because likely in the first job, it will be the first time they've had these adult style expectations. So what you think is obvious about having a quote unquote real job might not be obvious to them. And then the last one, really good ways to talk to folks and to relay information and to kind of manage is to tell stories about what it was like when you started the job, or how you decided to get into the water career, or how you learned this new task when you're training someone at work that's new. Stories are great. It's a great way for people to remember things and to gain information, but remember, avoid the good old days stories, or your glory days, implying that, you know, I walked uphill both ways and that was the way, that's the only hard, you know, you young generation, it's all easy for you. You know, those types of stories aren't really received very well, because it implies that this generation doesn't know what struggle is, or doesn't know what hardship is, or doesn't understand, you know, something difficult, which they do. It's just different difficult things. But those be like me stories, maybe not so much, but here's how I learned something stories. Here's where I messed up, but then learned something and got better. You know, here's about my experience. So tell those stories, just tell them in a way that's more inviting. All right, quickly, recruiting Gen Z, really emphasize that stable, high income opportunities that the water industry has. Like Khris talked about, use those graphs, talk to them about how, you know, they're going to make more money and have more opportunity for advancement than they will, you know, in other sectors. Technology is vital. I think it's my favorite thing that I learned most recently about Gen Z is that they consider technology in the same category as air and water. Let me say that again. They think we need air, water, and technology all equally as much. So knowing that, be sure when you're recruiting new young folks, you really emphasize how you integrate technology into what you do, how technology makes it easier, what advancements are coming. Really talk about that. And then meaningful work. I don't think this is just a Generation Z thing. I think this is all of us, especially when we were young. We wanted to make a difference in the world. We wanted to do work. We wanted that job that has a positive impact on our community, on our world. So really talking about what your utility does and how it benefits your community and why you do what you do every day, kind of that core reason, is important for that recruitment piece. Really show them that it's work worth doing. And then tell them all about how they're going to be able to connect with folks. Again, Gen Z, they don't want to do remote work from home. They want to have that connection. And it's an in-person connection. 74 prefer to communicate face-to-face with colleagues. So really talk about, you're going to, you know, interact with your colleagues this way, your customers this way, the community, here's how you can outreach in your community. That sort of stuff is going to be real attractive to Gen Z folks. An interesting side note that I learned in the book I'm going to tell you about at the end is 82% of Generation Z folks say that their parents will influence their career decisions. So I don't know how that impacts necessarily how you present things or who you talk to, but just knowing that those Gen Zers are close to their parents and they're going to talk about their job and their next job roles might be good for you to know as you're recruiting. Managing, just, you know, these are all things that we know from some previous slides about how Gen Z kind of see the world, but of course be trustworthy. That's going to be the main thing that I think makes or breaks a working relationship, especially with managers. Assign interactive work. There's schooling has been in groups, has been hands-on. So be sure to let them get their hands on the work. Don't just show them and then tell them about it, but as you're telling them about it, have them do it. That's everyone's best way to learn anyway, and especially these Gen Zers, they're gonna need to get their hands on and do it. So give them safe situations where they can practice and do it with you till they learn it, and then they can go off and do it on their own. Make all tasks meaningful. You know, there's a lot of stuff in our everyone's day-to-day work life that are like just things you check off the list, because they're kind of not the most fun, but make even those tasks that don't seem super important, make them meaningful. Why are we taking these records down? Why are we, checking these boxes, doing these safety checks, whatever? Tell them why they're doing the work and what makes it important for every task that they do. And that meaningfulness will help them not get bored or just disgruntled by having to do something that might not be very fun or exciting. And then, of course, show them their job growth opportunities. And this doesn't have to be like going up the ladder of employment from, to manager or whatever, but it might just be learning a new skill, taking on a new project, testing out a new technology. Give them opportunities to grow, and that's going to keep them engaged and excited about their job. Then we got to evaluate these folks. The best way, of course, frequent feedback. It doesn't have to be, don't wait until the end of the year and then give the list of grievances and the list of attaboys or attagirls. Do it frequently. As soon as you see something that's great, tell them it's great. As soon as you see something that needs to be fixed, tell them what needs to be fixed. And this really goes true for any generation. And then make sure that feedback or that evaluation is a give and take. Gen Zs are used to sharing their thoughts and opinions, especially online and things like that, and receiving feedback, giving and receiving. So make sure that in that evaluation or that feedback mode that you have for your staff, that there's time for them to give you feedback as well, about how they feel, about how they're doing, about what would make their job easier, what management style do they prefer? Maybe they like to be a little more micromanaged, maybe they want a hands-off. Just talking about that to make that management relationship better. And then shift the focus. Again, Gen Z, they are private. They are less full of self-esteem than the millennials were, and they want to be authentic, and they don't want to share all of their parts and pieces of themselves with you, but they do want to share their job part of themselves with you. So during this evaluation, shift the focus from the person to the job. Asking, how are you doing in this job? What does this job ask of you? How are you adding value to this work? What things do you need to know to do this job better? What are the needs and opportunities? So shift the focus and talk about how the staff person is doing in the job, so that it feels more comfortable for that Gen Zer to really focus on the job and the fit to the job than just the person in and of itself. And then I got a lot of the information that I shared today off this book called Marching Off the Map by Tim Elmore, and it's great. It's a great book. And so if you're wanting to learn more about Gen Z, this is a great place to start. And it's kind of a fun book to read. I read it. It's pretty quick. So I'm going to throw it back to Tess and Khris to get the questions started.
All right. Thanks, Tonya. So again, to the attendees, if you want to, if you have a question, you want to drop it into the questions tab on your dialog box, that would be great. One question is a little bit more of a logistical one, so I can answer it right away. The PowerPoint presentation via recording of the webinar will be made available to attendees. You'll get an email. It'll be posted to our website within the next few days, week at the most.
Yep. Great. So we do have some questions, and we also got several questions submitted in advance. So if you did submit a question in advance, we're going to try to get to it today. Thanks for doing that, and we can pretty much get started. We will try to get to all the questions. If we don't get to your question, we'll follow up with you after the webinar via email. So first, how do we attract good employees with such little pay? I'll let Khris start, and then we'll go to Tonya.
Well, I'll just bring up the point again from the Brookings report that I outlined that, particularly at the, the entry level or the lower level jobs, the 10th and the 25th percentile jobs, the pay may actually be more than that of competing jobs. If you find yourself in a position that your community isn't paying that well, then, frankly, I think it's time to have a conversation with your community, with your board, with your elected officials about how much you value water and, how important it is to get people into those positions. And it may mean a rate increase. And I know no one likes that, and there's probably certainly affordability issues for a lot of communities, which brings up a whole other bevy of concerns. But if you don't have anyone to operate the plant, then pretty much everything else goes away. So in order to be competitive, and you don't have to grossly increase salaries, but if you can't compete with a service industry job for some of those lower and entry paid, lower wage and entry level jobs, then you're probably a little bit on the wrong side of the market.
Great. Tonya, do you have anything to add to that? You were speaking a lot about the Gen Z and attracting newer or younger people as well. So maybe you might have something to add there.
Yeah, I think what Khris said is vitally important. Again, we work because it's called work because it's work. Otherwise we call it volunteering, and so it's got to make financial sense for someone to do the work. However, to make the job more attractive, be sure you're putting those messages out there about the meaningfulness of the work, how valuable the water industry is for your community. Get quotes from the local businesses or the board members of your community and to talk about, how vital and important water is or how important the water operator is to the community. Use those as marketing tools. Look at your job description. If it doesn't inspire you to want to apply for the job, it's not going to inspire anybody else. So include some of those messaging and meaningful, what makes this job meaningful sentences or paragraphs into the job description, along with all the, tick the boxes of you've got to lift this many and you've got to be able to do these tasks, but really showcase kind of the importance of the job that you're trying to hire for. That might be attractive to get folks to apply. And then if you're a small community and you're just having trouble getting someone to come out to where you are, and stick around, I've heard from a number of communities that see themselves as training grounds. So they don't expect when they hire someone that they're going to come and stay for 25 years. They know that they're just getting an operator that's trying to get their, level 1 or depending on, what state you're in, category 1 license, 1 or 2, we're going to work there 1 or 2, 3 years, and then they're going to move on to somewhere else where they can, make more money, move to a bigger city, that kind of thing. If that's where you're at, claim it. Contact another, city that's, the next over big city, work with them to, maybe they have someone come in that's not ready to work at, a level 3, 4 facility, but they're great, but they need someone with a higher experience level. They can refer them to you to start at your organization in a smaller utility and work their way up. Don't fight where you're at, use it.
I want to add one other thing, and it's kind of brought up by another question that was asked. It's not just the pay either. Think about the total compensation. Do you offer retirement or some sort of pension? so many people in the private sector don't have those kinds of opportunities, and that's compensation, time off, vacation, being flexible with work schedules. So maybe somebody, because of their home life or whatever else, really would rather work 4 10-hour shifts and 3 days off or something like that. Healthcare and that kind of stuff, that's all compensation that has a value to it and is part of that whole package. So it's not always just about pay. So Tess, do you want to ask another question?
Yeah, definitely. How can we communicate to the public about how important water professionals are?
Well, I think Tonya mentioned some of that a little bit, like getting together with folks and talking about the value of the service that they provide, and then how that should impact, pay. And then I mentioned near the top of the call the messaging component, and how important it is that we start talking about, again, at the national level, even in many states, when we talk about infrastructure, we talk about the infrastructure that we see, not the infrastructure that we don't see. And all of our pipes and pumps are buried. And even the pump houses and things are often made to be nondescript, so they kind of fade into the background. And we hide our plants because if they're wastewater plants, we don't want people to smell them or see them and complain about them. If they're water plants, they're probably next to a river or a source behind a building somewhere. And so being able to at least make people understand where the water's coming from and how valuable it is, there's a lot of, and maybe we should host a webinar just on engaging the public or into water, because there's so many resources and tools and ideas out there. And there's a lot of communities who are doing the best they can to try to raise visibility, raise public engagement and understanding of the value.
Great. So we do have another question along this same line. And this question is about when we want to attract new employees, how early should we start? Is it worthwhile to approach people in elementary school, high school, college? Where should we start? Maybe Tonya, if you want to start here, that would be great.
Well, it's never too early to start. Even if you have an immediate need, going out to elementary schools, a lot of times fourth graders are great. They're kind of in this sweet spot of age where they're super excited to do something new and excited to learn. They haven't gotten like hormonal attitudes yet, but they're old enough to understand and make connections, to the real world about what they're learning. But every elementary school kid's got some adults that watch over them, and they're going to come to the field trip, or they're going to be there, if you go to the school and do a presentation, or they're going to hear about it when the kids get home and share about what they learned that day. So it's never too early, even if you have immediate needs. Targeting elementary schools is valuable. I mean, that's how we got recycling in this country, is basically we didn't teach adults how to recycle because they weren't going to do anything new. We taught elementary school kids, who then bothered their parents to, with sob stories and all the information that they learned about recycling, and then they pestered their parents enough to start recycling at home. And so I think we can do that same thing with the value of water starting in elementary school. But high school programs also work really well. Connecting those with summer internships is a great way. We've had some success with that here in Kansas with a project we've got called Work in Water. So really targeting any age, be sure, I would say, to make sure that each of your board members, decision makers about your water treatment plant, have gone on a tour. Make it a family event, have them bring their kids or grandkids to do the tour. I think that's a really good way to educate, the decision makers, but also to allow them, once they've got their families there on the tour too, to make that connection that this is to keep, my family is impacted by what I'm seeing and what I'm learning about. So I think I answered the question.
Yeah, I mean, in short, absolutely. Get into those elementary schools, get kids to understand the value of water, and that, they could work for their community. delivering clean water, as a job when they graduate.
Great. Okay, so now we can shift a little bit over to the planning side. We have a question about planning for the future. So for a very small water system, and say you only have one employee and a part-time employee that might just be on call, what's the first thing that you can do to plan for someone else to come in and take over?
Well, so briefly, I think it's not that employee's job to do the planning, right? If you have a system and you only have 1 or 1.5 employees, it's the job of the board, it's the job of the elected board, whoever makes the financial decisions, who has a fiduciary and regulatory responsibility for that utility. It's their job to either provide the capacity on the employees side to do the planning, or to do the planning themselves and leave the employer to do the work that is critical.
Great. And then Tonya, I don't know if you want to add anything kind of on the planning side and transfer of knowledge side of things.
Yeah, so yeah, it is the responsibility of those decision makers to ensure that there is a pathway for succession for those small systems operators, but assigning the operators some knowledge transfer tasks, writing down what they do, taking videos of the processes that they do on a regular basis, not just for the future worker, but if something happens and they've got to leave town for a week or two, or get sick for a day, there's some information that anybody could go to be able to pick up the slack for that operator, and that's going to give them more opportunity and more comfort knowing that the job that they care about and the work that they do is valued, and it's just not all on them. No operator should feel like I can't be sick, or I can't take care of a family member if they get sick. We've got to give them enough support so that, and that's one of those things that's a recruitment tool too. If an operator doesn't feel like they're going to be valued in their organization, they're not going to want to work there, or they're not going to work there very long. So we've got to give them that support. So allowing that operator to share their knowledge so that it can be passed along to a future person, or just someone for while they still work there is valuable. It's not something you need to do just when someone's about to retire. You should be a constant state of knowledge transfer.
Great. Well, we are getting to the top of the hour, so I think we have time for one more question. And like I said before, if your question did not get answered, we will get back in touch with you over the course of the next week or so. But to finish up for today, how are small systems dealing with the lack of volunteers and an aging population? Do you know anything about what's happening now, or from a system that you've worked with in particular, about what they're doing? Do you want to start, Tonya?
I might give this to Khris, actually. He might have some examples
Sure.
with communities that he's worked with.
Sure. So first of all, I think, not to make assumptions that all small systems are rural, but, most rural systems are small, and it's really a really difficult issue to come to terms with, and it's one that for every community is different, right? So we have aging population, often a population that's becoming slightly more impoverished as time goes on, aging infrastructure, and just not a resurgence of economic development or even increase in population, right? And so you have to look at the community, the whole system, not just the water system, but the community as a system, and really do some kind of resiliency planning for that community, and thinking about what does the future for this community look like, what is the population that it's going to serve, in 10, 20, 30 years? And how are we going to make sure that we can continue to maintain vital services to those people who will live in this community at that time? So you go through that kind of systems thinking approach, and then sometimes the answer is, well, maybe we need to privatize the system. Maybe we need to connect our system to a neighboring system. Or you are so isolated and so far out there that those aren't necessarily options. But maybe you can raise rates, maybe you can't. You start to go through this kind of if-then scenario with all the different options that you have. And frankly, in many states, there's this push to privatize for very small systems to essentially get out of the business. I don't foresee states bailing out, so to speak, very small systems that are struggling to maintain compliance and offer clean and affordable water, unless in case of emergency. And so, I'm not exactly saying I love the idea of privatization, but in some ways that's maybe the best path forward for some communities where it doesn't look like they're going to grow anymore. Their population is aging, their infrastructure is aging, and there's not a lot of economic impetus for reinvestment. So that sounds kind of sad and dire, but that is kind of a composite example from a number of communities that we've been working with.
All right. And at this point, what I want to do is just one thing to finish out the day is we wanted to ask everyone, one thing the ESCN provides is technical assistance. So you can take a moment here to let us know if you do have workforce questions or you want to get started with your own internship program. Tonya already mentioned, but she has a work and water program that she's been working on. We have people that can pass on some advice or, schedule a phone call, do some assistance, and we can set you up with that. So if you answer our poll, someone will be in touch with you, and we can set you up with our survey. So it looks like everybody's responded, so I'm going to close this out. And on that note, Khris and Tonya, I'll let you close things out. Tonya, do you have any last words or final thoughts?
I think just from my end, my final thoughts are don't be scared of the next generation. They actually they are hardworking. They want to do a good job. Don't let some of those generational barriers get in the way. Just be authentic and get to know them, and they're going to be an awesome generation that just gets some good stuff done.
No, I don't think I have any additional thoughts. Thank you. And thank you for everyone for participating today.
Great. Thanks so much.